The first time Daniel saw her, she was drenched in enemy blood. Not human blood, not even her own kind. A thick, dark violet shade that splattered across the metal floor as she dragged the wounded captain behind her. She moved with the raw strength of someone who had survived fights far worse. Her breathing was heavy, her armor was cracked, her claws shook with exhaustion. Yet her eyes, those burning amber eyes, were calm. Everyone on the human side knew her name. Of the Stormborn, the feared alien warrior. The one who had ended wars simply by arriving on the battlefield. Humans whispered stories about her. That she could tear through steel with her bare hands. That she had once fought for 3 days without sleep. That she hated humans more than any species alive. And yet here she was, collapsing against the wall of the human outpost, refusing to let the captain die. Daniel, a simple communications officer, someone who was never supposed to see real combat, felt his heart thump wildly as their eyes met. For a moment, everything went silent. A human and the galaxy's most feared warrior, staring at each other in a narrow corridor filled with alarms, smoke, and the sharp scent of burning metal. It should have been terrifying. Yet she didn't raise her claws. She didn't roar. She just whispered, in a voice that seemed too soft for someone like her. "Help him." Daniel froze. This was the mystery everyone kept asking. Why was an alien warrior helping humans at all? Why this captain, why now? But he had no time to wonder. He rushed forward and took the captain's arm. Stepped back, not threatening, not aggressive, just tired. And Daniel noticed something strange. She was shaking. Not from fear. From pain. There was a deep cut across her ribs, glowing faintly with that same violet blood. She had been hit by a plasma blade, something that could kill even a Stormborn. "You're hurt," Daniel said instinctively. To his shock, she blinked at him, slowly, as if she was confused someone had even noticed. "I will heal," she murmured. But when she tried to stand, her knees buckled. Daniel didn't think. He grabbed her arm, her massive, armored, terrifying arm, to steady her. Everyone else in the outpost would never dare touch her. But Daniel did. His breath hitched. Not in anger. In surprise. She stared at him like no one had ever reached out to her before. As if she didn't know how to respond to simple kindness. Before either of them could speak, the building shook violently. Lights flickered. The enemy was attacking again. Daniel cursed under his breath. The outpost shields were almost gone. If they stayed here, they were dead. He slung the captain's arm over his shoulder and looked at. "Can you walk?" Stared at him, her lips pulled back slightly, not in a snarl, but something like a confused half-smile. "You speak to me as an equal," she said. Daniel blinked. "You're bleeding, you need help." Many see only the warrior, the weapon. She lowered her head. "Not the person." There was something raw in her voice, something no human soldier would have believed. Daniel swallowed. "Well," he said, "right now the person needs to move." For the first time, a soft breath escaped her, not quite a laugh, but close. Then she nodded. The three of them hurried toward the inner corridors as explosions shook the walls. Sparks rained down from the ceiling. Somewhere, metal groaned like a dying beast. Daniel could feel steps getting slower. He glanced back. Her face was pale. Her armor dripped blood. But her eyes stayed focused. She was pushing herself to keep up with him. Him, an ordinary human she had met less than 5 minutes ago. They reached the blast door to the medical bay. Daniel hit the switch. It didn't open. Power failure. Stepped forward and pressed her palm against the thick steel. "Move," she ordered quietly. Then she pulled. Her claws dug in, her muscles trembled, metal screeched. She ripped the door open with pure force. Daniel stared speechless. But she only turned her head slightly toward him and said, Go. That single word carried something unusual, something he couldn't name yet. Trust. As Daniel hurried inside with the captain, he glanced back one last time. Leaned against the wall, breathing hard, her eyes locked on him. There was fear in the hallway. Violence. Chaos. But in her gaze, there was something else. Curiosity. Confusion. A question she hadn't asked yet. A question he didn't understand. Not yet. But he would. Because this was only the beginning. The medical bay was chaos. Sparks hissed from broken panels. Half the lights were dead. Emergency sirens flashed red across the room. Daniel dragged the wounded captain to the nearest bed while med drones scrambled to assist. Only when the machines took over did Daniel allow himself to breathe. He leaned against the bed frame, chest heaving. His arms shook from adrenaline. Then the hairs on his neck rose. He felt her before he saw her. Of the Stormborn stood silently in the doorway she had ripped open. Her massive silhouette filled the frame. Her armor was cracked in half a dozen places, violet blood dripping steadily down her side. And her eyes, those fierce amber eyes, were fixed entirely on him. Not the medics. Not the captain she saved. Just him. Daniel swallowed hard. You should sit, he said quietly. Didn't move. She watched him with an expression he couldn't read. Something like confusion, something like longing. You are not a medic, she said. No, Daniel admitted, but I can help. You owe me nothing. He blinked. That's not how helping works. A faint frown crossed her face, the kind that suggested she was trying to translate a language she didn't speak. Among the Stormborn, she said, voice low, assistance is earned through blood debt or oath. You do not belong to me, I do not belong to you. Why help? Daniel stared at her. Was that really how her people lived? No wonder she looked so lost every time he showed concern. Because you saved our captain, he said. Because you're injured, because you're... He caught himself. She tilted her head. Because I am what? Daniel hesitated. She stepped closer, heavy boots clanking against the metal floor. Say it, human. He didn't flinch. You're a person, he said simply, and you're hurting. For a heartbeat, didn't breathe. No warrior expression. No mask. Just stunned silence. Then her eyes sharpened with something raw, something Daniel recognized too well. Loneliness. He approached her slowly, hands open so she wouldn't feel threatened. Let me check that wound, he said gently. No, she murmured. You're losing blood. No. Daniel frowned. Why not? Looked away, her claws flexed, gripping the torn metal beside the door. The warrior before him suddenly looked uncertain. My scars are not for humans to see. Daniel's breath caught. This wasn't pride. This wasn't arrogance. This was vulnerability. He said softly, I'm not judging you. She tensed at her name, as if no human had ever spoken it gently before. You do not fear me, she whispered. He gave a small, tired smile. Should I? Yes, she said honestly, everyone does. Not me. Why? Her voice shook with something dangerous. Not anger, emotion she didn't know how to handle. You saw me tear a door open. You saw me covered in blood. You know what I am. I know what you're not, Daniel said. She blinked. You're not a monster. Silence. The kind of silence where a whole life could change. Swayed on her feet, Daniel lunged and caught her before she fell. She stiffened in shock. No one touched a Stormborn without permission, but she didn't pull away. Her body trembled, not from fear. From exhaustion she'd been ignoring. He guided her to the side bed. She sat reluctantly, watching him as if expecting him to disappear. Daniel grabbed cleaning pads from the supply shelf. He approached her cautiously, waiting for any sign she didn't want him close. She didn't move. When he gently pressed the pad to her wound, she sucked in a sharp breath. "Sorry," he whispered. "It is tolerable," she said, though her voice wavered. Daniel cleaned the wound carefully, revealing an older scar beneath the fresh cut, an old plasma burn, jagged and deep. "How many battles have you fought?" he asked quietly. "Many. Alone." Something in her eyes flickered. "Yes." He swallowed. "Does anyone back home worry about you?" Her gaze shifted to the floor. "No." His chest tightened. "No one." Shook her head slowly. "I was forged for war. I was taught to kill. Affection is not for someone like me." Daniel stopped cleaning the wound. She looked up at him, confused by his stillness. He said softly, "Everyone deserves someone who cares." Her lips parted slightly. "Even me." "Especially you." For a moment her fierce amber eyes softened. Just a breath, just enough to show something fragile beneath. Then, boom. The outpost shook violently. A shockwave ripped through the walls, equipment crashed to the floor, alarms blared again. Daniel grabbed the bed rail. Stood instantly, wounded, bleeding, but ready to fight. The attack wasn't over. And whatever was coming next, they wouldn't face it alone. The explosion came from the east wing. Daniel felt the shockwave rattle the glass panels of the medical bay. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The entire room flickered between light and shadow as power tried desperately to stay alive. Didn't hesitate. Even wounded, she moved like liquid steel, fast, controlled, terrifyingly focused. She grabbed a discarded piece of armor plating and strapped it over her cracked chest plate with one sharp pull. "Stay behind me," she commanded. Daniel almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because he had never heard anyone speak with such certainty while bleeding out. "I'm not letting you go alone," he said. Paused for a heartbeat, barely noticeable, but enough to show she was surprised again. "You cannot fight," she said bluntly. "I can help," Daniel insisted. "I know the layout, I know the emergency routes, Another explosion cut him off, this one closer, the lights died completely. Emergency red strobe snapped on. The world turned crimson. Daniel felt cold dread crawl up his spine. If the enemy broke through the inner halls, everyone inside the outpost was as good as dead. Stepped toward him, her armor glowing faintly under the red lights. She towered over him, fierce and intimidating, but for the first time he wasn't afraid. She looked worried. Not for herself. For him. "You guided me earlier," she said quietly. "Without hesitation, you steadied me when I was weak." "You're not weak." Her eyes softened. "Still, you helped, but the danger is greater now. You should fall back." "I won't." "Daniel." She never said his name before. His pulse stuttered. For a moment, everything between them froze, the alarms, the sounds outside, the rumbling walls, just his name on her lips. Raw, sharp, almost gentle. It meant something to her. Maybe more than she understood. He swallowed. "I'm staying, deal with it." Stared at him for a long, breathless second. Then, to his shock, she let out a quiet, frustrated exhale. "You are difficult," she muttered. He grinned. "You'll get used to me." Before she could respond, the hallway outside erupted with footsteps. Heavy armored boots, not human. The enemy had breached the corridor. His eyes flashed with fire. She pushed Daniel behind a broken medical bed. "Do not move," she ordered. Daniel nodded despite every instinct screaming to stay at her side. Stepped into the doorway, posture straight, claws extended, her silhouette massive against the red lights. 3 enemy soldiers rounded the corner, tall, armored, armed with shock rifles. They froze when they saw her. One of them hissed something in their native tongue. Daniel didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. They were terrified of her. Tilted her head, a cruel smile pulling at her lips. "Bad choice," she growled. The enemies opened fire. Blue-white electricity arced through the air, moved like lightning, ducking behind the ripped metal doorframe. Bolts slammed into the wall, sending shards flying. She lunged forward. Her claws sliced through the first soldier's armor like fabric. He collapsed without a sound. The second soldier fired point-blank, caught his wrist, twisted, and hurled him into the wall with a sickening crack. The third tried to run, grabbed him by the back of the helmet, and slammed him into the floor. Silence fell just as quickly as the fight began. Daniel stood slowly, stepping out from behind the bed. His heart pounded. He had seen combat vids before, but nothing compared to witnessing her fight in person. She breathed hard, violet blood streaking down her side, but she didn't fall. Not yet. She walked back to him, each step heavy but steady. "Are you harmed?" she asked. He blinked. "Me. You're the one who just fought off 3 soldiers while half dead." Her brow furrowed. "I did not ask about myself." Daniel's chest tightened. This alien warrior, this terrifying legend, had just prioritized him over her own life. Again, he stepped closer, slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded predator. "You don't have to protect me." "Yes," she said simply, "I do." Her voice wasn't cold. It wasn't commanding. It was something else entirely. Soft, honest. She wasn't acting out of duty, or debt, or honor. Something new was forming, something she didn't yet understand, something she didn't believe she deserved. But she felt it anyway. Before Daniel could respond, the intercom crackled to life. "All personnel evacuate Sector 4. Enemy force has breached the main hall." Daniel's stomach dropped. The main hall was massive. If the enemy controlled it, they controlled the entire outpost. Turned to him. "Follow me," she said. "We will not survive if we stay." Daniel nodded, then stopped. "What happens if they capture you?" Her jaw clenched, the muscles in her neck tensed. "They will not capture me," she said quietly. "They would rather kill me." "Because they fear you," he whispered. "No," she finally looked at him. "Because they hate that I protect your kind." Daniel froze. That truth hung between them like a blade. The enemy wasn't just after the outpost. They were hunting her. And suddenly, Daniel realized. Didn't just save humans. She betrayed her own people to do it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Why help us?" Her breath hitched. Then she whispered words he never expected to hear from the galaxy's strongest warrior. "Because you are the only ones who ever treated me like I was more than a weapon." The alarms screamed around them. The walls shook. But Daniel barely heard it. Because her eyes, those fierce amber eyes, held pain deeper than any wound. And he knew this was only the edge of the truth. A truth she had never spoken aloud. A truth that would change both their lives. The corridor was a war zone. Smoke curled from scorched walls. Sparks danced like fireflies in the darkness. Daniel followed as she led them through a narrow maintenance tunnel, her massive frame barely slowing despite her injuries. He glanced at her again. Each step she took made his chest tighten. She wasn't just strong, she was relentless, fierce, and yet human in ways he didn't expect. "Why do you keep helping us?" he asked quietly, careful not to startle her. Amber eyes flicked to him. For a moment the warrior mask slipped. The raw vulnerability beneath made Daniel catch his breath. "You are unlike the others," she admitted, voice low. "Most see only a weapon. They do not see what lies beneath, not the pain, not the loneliness." Daniel nodded slowly. I see you." She stopped. The tunnel widened into a small maintenance alcove. She leaned against the wall, breathing ragged. Daniel noticed a series of faint scars across her forearms, thin, silvery lines running in parallel, clearly from past battles. "Why did you save me, Daniel?" she asked suddenly, her voice almost trembling. He froze. "I didn't think. I couldn't watch you get hurt." Her eyes softened. A strange warmth glimmered in them like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. No one has ever said that to me. No one like that. Daniel stepped closer. You're not just a weapon, you're not just the stormborn warrior, you're beautiful. She blinked, staggered, something in her body went rigid, her claws flexed. Then, in a whisper, almost a hiss. Beautiful. Yes, Daniel said firmly, I mean it. She looked away, covering her face with one massive hand. The metallic plates of her armor scraped softly. Her voice was quieter now, almost vulnerable. Why call me that? I am feared, I am a killer, I am not someone who should be called beautiful. Daniel's heart ached. Here was the galaxy's fiercest warrior, someone who had ended armies, someone who lived in constant war, questioning whether she deserved a simple human compliment. Because it's true, he said softly. Because beneath all that armor, beneath the fighting and the blood, you are human in ways you don't allow yourself to see. And humans, we are drawn to that. We see what's real, even when others don't. For the first time, lips curved, not a full smile, but the hint of one. Her gaze held his, trembling but steady. The flickering lights made her amber eyes look like molten gold. Daniel swallowed. I don't just see the warrior, I see you, and I care about you. She flinched slightly. Care, humans say that, but they rarely mean it. They say it to manipulate, to survive. I don't mean it to survive, he said. I mean it because I like you truly. His breathing hitched. She took a step back, but her hand never left the wall. Her claws flexed. The predator instinct warred with the vulnerability she didn't know how to handle. You risk yourself for me, she whispered. You do not run, you do not fear me. And now you speak words that none have dared, none have seen me beyond the warrior mask. Daniel nodded. Because I know there's more. Because I know that even in the darkest battles, there is a part of you that longs to be loved, not feared. Her amber eyes glimmered with unshed tears. For a moment, the fierce warrior, the Stormborn, was gone. All that remained was a creature who had fought all her life alone, afraid to be seen, afraid to be loved. You are the first, she whispered. The first being who has ever made me feel like I am more than my battles. Daniel reached out slowly, not to touch her but to let her know he was there. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She simply let him exist in that small space with her, like sunlight after endless darkness. Then the alarms blared again. Another attack closer this time. The outpost shook violently. Straightened instantly. The warrior was back, the predator, the unstoppable force, but Daniel noticed the difference. Her movements were faster, sharper, yes, but her eyes occasionally flicked to him, seeking reassurance, connection. We must move, she said, her voice strong again. Daniel followed, heart still pounding, mind still reeling. That single exchange, her words, her hesitation, that flicker of vulnerability, had cracked something open in both of them. And Daniel knew, with a certainty he had never felt before, that he would follow her anywhere. Because he had seen her, not just the warrior, not just the Stormborn, but... And for the first time, she had seen someone who loved her for who she truly was. The next corridor stretched ahead, dark and twisted. The danger wasn't over. But Daniel realized something terrifying and exhilarating. He didn't just want to survive this attack. He wanted to survive it with her. The corridor narrowed, filled with smoke and debris. Sparks rained from fractured panels, illuminating towering form as she led the way. Every step she took was deliberate, every movement a testament to her combat-honed instincts. Daniel struggled to keep pace, adrenaline and fear fighting against exhaustion. He panted, "How are you still standing?" Her amber eyes flicked to him briefly, a flicker of pain but no hesitation. "I endure," she said. "Endurance is survival." The truth in her words hit Daniel hard. He'd seen warriors before, soldiers willing to die for orders. But she endured because of something else, something unspoken, something deeper. They rounded a corner and the outpost's main hall lay ahead. Smoke and fire clouded the space, but Daniel froze in shock. Bodies, human and alien, were strewn across the floor. The enemy soldiers had broken through faster than anyone anticipated. Lips pressed into a thin line. She scanned the room. One step forward, two, then a sudden crouch. She ducked behind a fallen beam, signaling Daniel to follow. "Stay low," she ordered. Her voice wasn't sharp this time. It carried the weight of someone protecting someone precious. Daniel obeyed. He crouched beside her, heart pounding. The soldiers ahead moved with mechanical precision, but eyes tracked every detail. "They're closing in," she whispered. "We cannot outrun them. We must fight." Daniel swallowed hard. Fight. Against her. Against her and the enemy. But then he realized he wasn't here to fight against her. He was here to fight with her. "Then we fight together," he said, voice steady. His head snapped toward him. For a heartbeat, surprise flickered in her eyes. Then a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Together," she repeated, almost like a vow. The first soldier entered their range, struck like lightning. Her claws tore through his armor before he could fire a single shot. Daniel, for the first time, noticed the fluidity in her movements, the way every strike was calculated, powerful yet precise. "Cover me," she shouted, grabbing a fallen shock rifle. She fired with uncanny accuracy, sending two soldiers sprawling. Daniel hesitated. Then instinct took over. He picked up another rifle, aiming at the approaching enemies. His hands shook, but he didn't falter. Glanced at him once, then returned to the fight. That look, that brief moment of connection, gave him courage he never knew he had. They moved in unison. Ferocious, unstoppable, brilliant. Daniel, human, fragile, yet determined. Together they became a force neither could have imagined alone. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the main hall fell silent. Smoke hung in the air. Bodies littered the floor. Daniel's arms ached, his ears rang from gunfire, but he was alive. And so was she. Turned to him. Her armor was battered, her blood streaked across it, but her eyes softened in a way Daniel had never seen. "You survived," she said, "and you did not falter." Daniel shook his head. "We survived together." For a moment she looked at him, really looked. No judgment, no fear, no threat, just recognition. "You are unlike any human I have known," she said softly. Daniel's chest tightened. "And you are unlike anyone I've ever met, She cut him off with a raised hand. Not aggressive, just vulnerable. "Do not speak yet," she whispered. "There is still danger, but stay close." Daniel nodded. He stepped closer, instinctively brushing the edge of her armor. She didn't move away. That simple human connection, so small yet so enormous, made both of them aware of what was forming. Another rumble shook the outpost. Reinforcements or more enemies. Daniel didn't care. He was ready to face it. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't facing it alone. Glanced at him again, amber eyes locking with his. Her voice was barely audible, almost a confession. "You trust me." "I trust you," Daniel said firmly, "with my life." A tiny, almost imperceptible smile tugged at her lips. Then, "Do not falter, not now, not ever." The next corridor stretched ahead, shrouded in darkness and smoke. Every step could be death. Every shadow could hide an enemy. But Daniel no longer felt fear. Because beside him was the feared stormborn warrior, the one the galaxy trembled before, and she had finally met someone who loved her. And now, he would never let her face the world alone. The emergency corridors were chaotic. Sparks flew from damaged panels, smoke twisted like ghosts in the red emergency lights. Daniel followed's lead, every sense on high alert. But this time, something was different. Every glance he stole at her sent his heart racing. She was terrifying, yes, a living legend of destruction and war, but vulnerable now in ways no one had ever seen. Her armor was cracked, blood streaked across her side, and yet she moved with an elegance and focus that made him feel small and human and alive all at once. He whispered as they ducked behind a fallen beam, How do you do this every day?" She didn't answer immediately. Her amber eyes scanned the hallway ahead, muscles tense, claws flexing. Finally, she said softly, almost to herself, "I was made to endure, to fight, to conquer. This is my existence." Daniel swallowed. "But this helping us, protecting us, this isn't just survival, this is sacrifice." For the first time, her gaze met his and lingered. She didn't look at him as a human. She didn't look at him as an ally, she looked at him as someone who could see all of her. Not the warrior, not the weapon, not the fearsome Stormborn, but the being beneath the armor. "You see me," she said, voice barely a whisper. "Not the Stormborn, not the killer, you see me." Daniel felt heat rush to his face. "Because that's who you are, that's always been you." Her eyes softened, but she shook her head slightly, almost ashamed. "I have never known this, to be seen, to be understood, to be loved." Daniel's heart ached. Here was the most feared warrior in the galaxy, admitting she had never been loved, not truly. Not by anyone, not by her own people, not by the humans who feared her. He said, stepping closer carefully, aware of every inch of space between them, "You are loved. You will be loved by me." She flinched slightly, like his words were a blade she didn't know how to dodge. Her breathing hitched. "Love," she whispered almost incredulously. "No one has ever said that to me, and yet I feel it." Daniel reached out slowly, hesitating just a fraction. Her massive hand hovered in the air for a heartbeat. Then, astonishingly, she let him take it. His fingers wrapped around hers. Strong, warm, real. Not the claws of a warrior, not the mask of a legend, but the hand of someone who could feel pain, fear, longing, and hope. The moment stretched. The alarms, the chaos, the dangers outside, they all melted into silence. He whispered, "I'm here, I'm not leaving, not now, not ever." Her amber eyes glistened with something new, something terrifying for someone like her. Trust. Vulnerable, raw, but daring to believe in connection. For a heartbeat, she lowered her massive head toward him. Their faces were close. So close that Daniel could see the faint scars along her jawline, the faintest quiver of her lips, the exhaustion in her eyes. Why call me beautiful?" she asked again, her voice trembling, almost shy. Daniel smiled, a gentle, human smile that reached his eyes. "Because you are. Not the armor, not the claws, not the fear you inspire you. You're beautiful, fierce, terrifying, wounded, strong, and every part of you matters. Every part of you is worthy of love." For the first times, walls cracked completely. She let herself lean into him, not out of weakness, but out of trust. Out of something she hadn't allowed herself in centuries, hope. A distant explosion shook the corridor, bringing them back to reality. The enemy wasn't gone. The outpost was still a battlefield. Danger was still moments away. But for that brief moment, it didn't matter. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. "We fight together," he said. Her lips curved into the smallest, fiercest smile he had ever seen. "Together," she echoed. And then, with their hands clasped, hearts pounding in sync, they stepped into the next corridor, the unknown, the danger, the chaos, but no longer alone. Because they had found something stronger than fear. Stronger than the battlefield. Stronger than the galaxy's hatred. They had found each other. And nothing, not war, not blood, not death, could take that away. But just as they moved forward, a shadow detached itself from the smoke ahead. Something massive, something alive, something that had been stalking the outpost, and it was coming straight for them. Daniel's pulse spiked. His amber eyes flared with instinct. And in that instant, both realized the real battle had only just begun. The shadow loomed larger. Massive, armored, and alien in every sense, it moved with terrifying precision. Daniel froze for a moment, staring at the creature's glowing eyes and rows of jagged teeth. Every instinct screamed to run. His hand tightened around his. Her amber eyes blazed, every muscle coiled for attack. She stepped forward, placing herself between Daniel and the beast. "Stay behind me," she commanded, voice low but unwavering. Daniel didn't flinch, he shook his head. "No, I fight with you always." For the first time, his expression softened. Not softened in fear, but in awe, in trust, in something deeper. She hadn't just met someone who understood her. She had met someone who refused to leave her side, even in the face of death. The creature lunged, moved like lightning. Her claws flashed in the dim red light, slicing cleanly through armored plating. The creature howled, but she didn't pause. Daniel felt the raw power radiating from her with every strike, yet the way she fought, it wasn't blind rage. It was precision, control, focus, humanity beneath the storm. Daniel raised his weapon. He fired carefully, aiming for the joints and soft spots had noted with a glance. His bullets found their marks. The creature staggered, didn't hesitate. She seized the moment, launching herself at its massive chest, claws sinking deep, pulling the creature down. Daniel ran forward. Together they forced the beast back, his fury and his determination blending into a force neither could have wielded alone. Finally, with a final, bone-crushing strike, brought the creature down. It thrashed once, then lay still. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Daniel looked at her, panting, his hands trembling. She was bruised, bloodied, armor shattered, but alive, unbroken. "You did it," he said, voice catching. "We did it." Blinked, and for the first time Daniel saw a full smile. Fierce, yet warm, alive, real, not the terrifying Stormborn the galaxy feared, just. "You stayed," she whispered. "Through the battle, through everything." "I stayed," Daniel said, stepping closer. His heart pounded and he reached out, brushing a streak of blood from her cheek. "Because I care about you, more than I ever thought I could care about anyone." Her amber eyes softened, shimmering with emotion he had never seen from a warrior. "No one has ever said that to me," she admitted. Her voice trembled, fragile yet honest. "And no one has ever made me feel beautiful." Daniel's chest ached. "Because you are beautiful, fierce, strong, wounded, brave, and none of that makes you less, it makes you more." Tears welled in her eyes. The fearsome alien warrior who had destroyed armies and struck terror into countless worlds let herself collapse, briefly, into his embrace. She rested her head on his shoulder, trembling. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "How to feel this, how to trust." "Then start with me," Daniel said softly. "Start with us, we'll figure the rest out together." For the first time in centuries, allowed herself to be seen, to be loved, to be human in every sense beneath the alien warrior exterior. The alarms still blared. The outpost was far from safe. The enemy would regroup. But in that small moment, Daniel and were untouchable. Together they had faced fear, death, and loneliness, and emerged stronger. She pulled back slightly, amber eyes locking with his. "Daniel, you are unlike any being I have ever met. You see me, all of me, and still you stay." "I stay," he said firmly, gripping her hands, "because I love you." The words hung in the air, heavy, true, irrevocable. His lips curved into a full, radiant smile. "Then I will try to believe it." They stood there amidst the wreckage, holding onto each other. The galaxy outside could rage, could fear, could destroy, but they had found something stronger. Something unbreakable. Love. Not born from safety or comfort. Not born from ease. Born from fire, battle, trust, and the courage to see someone for who they truly were. Daniel pressed his forehead to hers. "We'll face everything together," he whispered. Nodded. "Together," she repeated. And as the red lights flickered, and the distant echoes of war rumbled through the outpost, one terrifying, feared, unstoppable warrior finally understood something she had never dared to believe. She could be more than a weapon, she could be loved. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel that love, without fear, without hesitation, without armor. Because someone had finally seen her and never flinched. And in that she found her strength, her purpose, her heart. Together they would survive. Together they would thrive. Together they would rewrite the story of a warrior feared by all and the human who loved her.